Good evening and welcome to the Thursday, March 17th, 2022 regular meeting of the school committee. We have just returned from executive session a couple of minutes ago. And so at this time, we're going to move directly into public comment. So are there people here who would like to make a public comment? If so, now you can come on up right now.
Is anybody coming through? Okay.
So, and what I have done tonight, and this is totally optional, but if you would like to leave your name and contact information,
Okay, I'll do it after.
if you want us to circle back, because it,
Yes.
but totally optional. So go ahead if you want to start and just let
Hello, everybody.
your name, share your name with the
Yes.
age camp.
My name is Marcela Krishnamurthy, and I live on 9 Hardstone Road. We moved here in the peak of COVID of 2020, and it was not an easy move. From New Jersey, that actually is a state in the union from I believe 36 states that do have laws for all public schools in the state to have gifted program. It's mandated by law. It was hard adjustment, hard change, many different reasons. I first was not sure what to do, so I called the state. I was referred from the state to communicate with the school. I attempted to communicate with the school, and it was not with any positive ending or solution for my child. We are, as you know, we communicated with school committee, and we would like to keep going on where it was left about 3 years ago, when I learned, was not here back then, that we had actually auditorium full of people with a teacher from SAGE program, a nation-wide recognized expert. I'm sorry, I'm still running, my breath is. The presentation happened and nothing really occurred after that. So then COVID came, of course, everything was put on hold. We kept waiting, and we are looking for Dr. Kavanagh to actually lead us, and we are looking to move this agenda. So next year, going forward, we would like to see children, that roughly 10%, 7 to 10% children who could benefit for some program, or who are basically in the category that I don't want to use the word, we use advanced learners or above grade learners, because it seems to be, the word gifted seems to be just upsetting a lot of people. So if I say it by any means, I don't mean that. I just am used to it from previous state, and it's a word that's actually used nationwide as well. So we are very excited to see our children engaged. We are excited to see the twice exceptional children that are often referred as 2E, who are children who actually have IEP for their special need, but they also are advanced learners. It might be one subject, it might be many more. Usually these children are children with autism or ADHD, and we have great population of that, to my knowledge. So they could take advantage of such program or counselor, not counselor, expert that we hope to hire, at least, if not opening a program. So we are eager to find out what Dr. Kavanagh believes and what is her opinion about what we are finally going to do for this population of children.
So I'm going to interrupt you just for a minute, because we have a 3-minute time limit, so I'm going to just ask if you can try to summarize the rest.
Yes. So we are looking for this sophisticated conversation, how the district will engage all children, as it always says it does. current situation, parents enrolling children in Russian School of Math to prevent the disengagement, that only widens the gap between the ones who can afford it and who cannot. And I think I was going to say something about the equity that we're going to discuss later, but we'll leave it for another meeting. So we are looking for that presentation with a lot of hopes. Thank you.
Thank you. And it also just want to acknowledge it's nice to meet you
Thank
face
you.
to face, because I know we did speak a few months ago.
Thank you for being able to see everybody in person.
Thank you. Are there other people that would like to speak before we move into the rest of our business? Okay. All right, thank you. So are there recognitions tonight? Okay. Then that.
I think Leah does.
Oh, I'm sorry, Leah. Yes.
I wasn't asking for recognition, but with everything that happened in the Ukraine and the children and women's hospital last week, I was hoping maybe we could do a moment of silence.
Absolutely. I think that is great. I think that we could just take a moment of silence right now. That would be great. Thank you for bringing that to the table with us. Jesse, do you want to go ahead and start with the
Yes,
student
of
council
course.
report?
Hi everyone. At the high school, everything's been going pretty well recently. We've recently wrapped up a lot of our winter activities and have definitely been enjoying some of this nicer weather, transitioning us into spring. The HHS Hop Genetics teams A, F, H, and J qualified for the VEX Robotics World Championship in Dallas, Texas, and our BPA students also did a great job at states last weekend and have also advanced to nationals in Texas. The drama department and the cast of 12 Angry Jurors put on a very successful show last weekend. They did a really great job, and I know the auditorium was pretty full when I went on Friday night, so it's definitely good to see our community supporting our drama department. Student Council hosted our 3v3 basketball tournament in the spirit of March Madness yesterday, and it went very well. We had over 15 teams playing with 2 teacher teams as well, which drew a lot of fans. And Mr. Bishop even had a very exciting buzzer beater to win the teacher championship. So if you see him, congratulate him on that. One exciting thing coming up at the high school is the start of our senior projects after April break, which is a chance for our seniors to create projects for themselves to explore potential interests in different career paths or pursue other passions. And we do have an exciting opportunity this year with the chance to intern at some of the other schools from Marathon to middle school, but I know we'll talk about that later, so I'll leave that to them, but a great opportunity. And I'd also like to give a shout out to the class of 2024 and especially their class officers, because they organized a fundraiser for Ukraine and have been collecting donations for those in need over there. And they had a table set up last week at lunch and raised over $1,000, which is amazing, obviously. And finally, our spring sports season begin next Monday, so hopefully I'll continue to have some sports updates as well at the coming meetings. But that's all I have for today, so if you have any questions.
Fabulous.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Always a highlight to hear all of the things going on.
Mm-hmm.
Was that tournament videoed?
Sure, I don't think so, but there are some pictures if you check the Student Council Instagram.
Thank you.
It's so great that the staff participates because
I know.
people love to play at that tournament. That's a great event.
Yeah,
So
it
fun.
really is so great.
Okay, that's great, thank you. Okay, so we have then the student internship report.
Okay, I can get off that screen. Mrs. Parson, and you can get
Sure.
on.
Lexi, do you have any updates on our other 2 interns?
I do not.
Okay.
I
Do you
can-
think they're driving around Hopkinton?
Let me text Charlie right now.
Okay. We
Do you
might have
wanna-
had a little kerfuffle with the address.
Do you want us to go out of order with that?
Should we give it a couple? Do we have a short one that we could put just in case we have?
I just texted Charlie, so I can let you know if
Perfect.
and when she responds.
Okay, thank you.
I could very quickly go into the school committee chair report, if that would give a couple of minutes. So
Yes, that would be great.
payroll warrant S22019 and warrants 22032, 22033, 22034, 22035, and 22036 have been approved. The warrants are included in the packet. Office hours have been posted because now I know people are aware that our our configuration here on the school committee has shifted with some resignations. We are now a quorum of 2. So any point at which the school committee is meeting on school committee business, if there are going to be 2 of us or more present, we do need to post to legally have that discussion. So our office hours are scheduled. We have one for this Sunday, the 20th at 7 p.m. by Zoom. The Zoom link is available on the town calendar, and I believe all 3 of us are going to be at that. And then the other office hours we have scheduled is in person on Wednesday, the 23rd at 6 o'clock, which is ahead of there is a concert at the Hopkinton Middle School. So we will do that in person then, and hope to have conversations and discussion questions from the community, and I look forward to those. Those have been a lot of fun and rewarding, and also, more importantly, informative when we've done them in the past. So I look forward to that. And then, do you want to flip into now the student internship report?
Yeah, so I'd love to invite Cy and Lexi and Charlie, if you could come up, please. Oh, no Charlie yet. Do we think she's... Well, you know what, by the time I finish talking, and then, okay, perfect.
So Charlie actually isn't able to come in today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But we have Shreya, an intern from Elmwood, that also came.
Oh, Shreya, come on up. That's great. I'm sorry, I didn't recognize you. I thought that I connected to studio.
Oh, does Bob know you're, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Do that. Oh. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you for giving us a few minutes tonight. I am really thrilled to bring back the high school senior internship education project to Hopkinton High School, along with Mr. Bishop and the rest of the high school administration, and interestingly with the other 4 schools in our district all being part of this year, and 3 of our student interns here this evening. Would you all like to introduce yourselves?
I'm Lexi Trendle.
I'm Sagar Napati.
I'm Sarah Ravi.
So we have 11 interns working with us this year, which is a little bit more than we had last year. And we had such great success with the program last year that we were really thrilled to be able to bring it back and see that the state was offering the program again. So just to give the community a refresher on what this program actually is, this is an opportunity for paid work experiences for students in their senior year in good standing with several different goals. And the goals being to offer our students the opportunity to work through a paid internship in grades pre-K through 8. So that's why we don't have interns at the high school, because the program wasn't designed that way. The hope on the part of the Mass Department of Education is to accelerate the growth of the teacher pipeline in Massachusetts. And really the impetus for this was the pandemic, and thinking about learning loss and some of the challenges that students have faced. Can we capitalize on our high school seniors to use some of their talents and their strengths to help our younger students? So again, it's funded through a grant through the Department of Education. Mass Higher Metro Southwest is the company that's kind of serving as our go-between. So that's the company that's paying their salary. It's nothing from the town of Hopkinton. They've all filled out all the paperwork, W-2s and the whole 9 yards. And so it's very kind of a very professional operation. For now, while they're still considered seniors and still, working in their coursework, their hours have been planned very flexibly through their high school administration, and they all took the initiative and contacted the schools where they were assigned and worked out, for the next few weeks I'll be available for these certain times, and soon into April, once senior project time comes around, they'll have a lot more flexibility and time to be able to dedicate even more hours to our elementary schools and our middle school. So this is just to give you kind of an idea of the breadth of where our student interns are located this year. And all of these placements, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, really were based on an interest survey that we provided to the seniors. And we were looking for, what kind of drives you? What are you looking for? Do you like the older students? Do you like the younger students? Some students had specific requests for teachers, I'd like to work with this teacher, I had that teacher. I happened to be at Marathon School one day, and the teachers were talking about a former student, and everybody was very excited to see that student back in the capacity as an employee, actually, in not just a kindergartner or a first grader. But it's very nicely representative of the different areas of our curriculum where our students have landed. So at an opening meeting that Mr. Bishop and I ran with the prospective interns, we talked about some of the expectations, and we talked about it really as a legitimate working opportunity. And we talked about their role as serving as role models for our younger students. And as you can see up there, some of the expectations are very much in line with what we would expect in the workplace for all employees. So thinking about where we are, we're just at the very beginning of this. So I think, we're fortunate to have 3 interns here today, but I don't think they'll have the full complement of experience to talk about tonight. We're really kind of the infancy of their internship, but they've all been out there and had some experiences so far to speak to. And then after April vacation, as I said earlier, their time and their availability will increase. A number of them will be using this as their senior project, which feels very valid and a really excellent use of that time and in terms of the experience that they'll be bringing. Many of our interns this year expressed a desire to pursue education. I don't know if you'll say something different tonight when you get to finally open your mouths, and that's perfectly fine. But I did find it to be dramatically different from last year when most of our students were not especially interested in pursuing a degree in education, but many of them were interested in engineering, and so they elected to work in the engineering classrooms. So it was still a passion of theirs, but who knows, maybe some of them will change their mind. One thing that's added to the program this year is the expectation that a final project will be completed by the students, and that will help, I think, hopefully promote the program through the Department of Education. That's not a Hopkinton requirement, that's a requirement of the program, and that's essentially just a reflection of, how did it go, what did you accomplish, what did you learn, kind of thing. Last summer, we were able to have some of our interns come back and work for us in some of our summer learning programs, and those opportunities will still be available this year. And I've already talked about some of their future plans. So I reached out to some of the educators who have already started working with the students, and these are some of the thoughts that they've shared so far. They've been incredibly complimentary about the work that they've seen, from it's awesome, it's so nice to have an extra set of hands, Mr. Sai, that's what they call you, I've been told. I'm very excited to get high fives with you. One teacher talked about actually getting her intern up and having her actually lead some lessons and kind of co-plan with her. It's really the gamut of things that they'll be involved with. But who you really want to hear from is our interns. So I put together a few questions for all of you, and you can feel free to respond to some of these, but I think our committee and the public who are watching would be interested in knowing, what drove you to apply for this, what are some of the things you've learned, what have you found especially rewarding or enjoyable, and maybe a little bit about what you might be looking forward to in the future.
So, like I said earlier, my name's Lexi Trendle, and I've been working at Elmwood School with Miss Gauss, the art teacher, and Miss Page, one of the 3rd grade teachers, who were actually both my teachers when I was at Elmwood School. I was inspired to apply for this program mainly because I love spending time with kids. As of right now, I'm not planning on pursuing a career in education, but I know that this internship will be beneficial for both college and my future career search. My experience at Elmwood so far has been overwhelmingly positive. Everybody's welcomed me and have been more than happy to help me out with anything I need. Working with Miss Gauss in the art classroom is especially fun because I have a lot of creative freedom. I can do the project myself, I can talk to the students, or I can help them with their project, and that gives me the opportunity to build relationships with students from all throughout the school, of all teachers and all grades. While with Miss Page, I have a much more personalized experience with the students, and I have the opportunity to teach the curriculum and build relationships with a much smaller group of students, which makes that really special. So I'm super excited to start going into Elmwood more often once my senior project starts and spending time with the students and teachers each day.
Hi everyone, as I previously mentioned, my name is Sagar Napati. I originally decided to apply for this program just because Mr. Bishop sent an email out, and being a senior, second semester, a lot of the studies that we're given weren't necessarily being used productively. So I thought that this would be a nice way to sort of immerse myself in the education field, work with children in a closer capacity, and I also decided to work for the ESOL program at Marathon, and being a bilingual student, and having a brother that actually went through the ESOL program at Marathon, I guess sort of working with the bilingual program there just seemed sort of meaningful to me, and that was something that I wanted to pursue there. And so far, I think that it's been an amazing learning experience. I think that a lot of times we don't give elementary school teachers the credit that they deserve, because it's definitely, a profession that is characterized by patience, hard work, and, perseverance. And I think that, the skills that I've learned even so far, just during the past couple of weeks or so, in regards to, lesson planning and communication, have just been so valuable. And, looking forward, I'm not necessarily sure if I want to pursue a career in education or not, but I do have a passion for linguistics and the complexities of language, and this program has really exposed me to those those fields, and in the future I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do, but I've definitely learned a lot of valuable skills, and I've gained a lot of valuable experience through this program that I'm definitely not going to forget.
Hi everyone, my name is Soraya, and I'm placed at Hopkins with Mr. Bernstein teaching 4th grade. And I've just loved it so much. Like, the first time I walked into the classroom and introduced myself to all the students, my supervisor, he let me, have the kids ask some questions about, high school. My first question, oh my gosh, does high school have exploding stuff? Because that's what I heard. And then the second question was, what is the exact month and date that World War II started? And it's just I just jumped right into this super fun environment. The kids are so enthusiastic, and what I've really learned and found rewarding with it is, in a 4th grade classroom, it's not really at all like a high school or middle school setting, because there's not leveling. So you have students of all levels in one classroom, and what I really had to work with is kids who are on the next week's lesson versus kids who don't understand the task that was designed for today. And what I found super rewarding is working with those kids who just need a little direction, just a little push to help stay on track, and you see so much growth and development in them. It's super rewarding. I really enjoyed working with them, and they're just so they're so fun. 10-year-olds just have a very lighthearted sense of humor. They're innocent, and it's just they're so full of happiness. They make me so happy, and I feel I'm a whole year younger when I walk into there. And I am also looking forward to education in the future. I am considering administration in education, so hopefully I'll get to work in more internships like this during my time in college, and then see where everything takes me. But I'm just so excited to spend more time in the classroom too, as everyone else has mentioned, once senior project starts. I'm also working with some of the music teachers, because when the students are in their specials and stuff, there's not much to do in the classroom, so I go down with the music teachers and help them with that too. So it's been rewarding. Obviously with music, you see a lot of progress in a short amount of time. I just came from the Hopkins concert right now, and it's so adorable. You see so much progress. They can't pick up an instrument, and then a month later they're already able to play a little song for you. So it's just amazing how fast they develop at such a young age. So I'm really looking forward to doing more.
And this is sort of unrelated as well, but from my observations, I feel like I've witnessed somewhat of an increase in productivity as well from my teachers, and I think that being an intern and being given the opportunity to sort of take on some of that busy work, laminating papers, and working individually with students has really pushed some of the teachers that I work with to have that extra time to work on enrichment sort of activities, work more closely with some kids, and overall I feel like it's just sort of cultivated a more welcoming and productive environment.
Fabulous. Oh.
The one thing I'll say before you'll ask questions is when we had the introductory meeting with the students, Mr. Bishop and I, this is exactly how they presented. And it was really the most gratifying meeting that I've been in all year, sitting with these high school seniors with really intelligent questions and perspectives and just so excited to get out there. So we're very, very lucky.
Questions? Comments?
I mean, comment. Wow. I mean, this is really wonderful. It's really wonderful that you're spending your time, your senior project, and helping kids and helping other people and supporting the teachers. Like that's a very worthy thing to spend time on. And I loved your comment about the free periods. No, but it's true, right? It's for a lot of people, having that free period would be like, I'm gonna lay back, I'm not gonna do a lot, and you took it as an opportunity, as something that you could do more, that you could grow more, and you could help other people grow more, and that's wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you guys are just amazing. I mean, I love when students come here because I feel like you are such great ambassadors for the work of the district. I mean, just look at all of you are so well spoken, and you're so generous with your talents and your time, and reflective. Like you're reflecting as you're working on what you're learning and what you're able to give back, but also you're growing yourselves in as teachers. So it's fabulous. It's very rewarding to see you guys come forward and hear your stories. And thank you for your generosity and your work with the kids. I would love to talk to you when you're done. I'd love to hear all the stories. But, anyway, thank you.
So a couple things. One is our best meetings are when we have more students here. So thank you for coming and talking about this directly with us. This is amazing, I think, for the kids that you're working with to have high school students to be able to look ahead in the district and to have, because you're closer in age than like old people like us. I mean, I think that I know from my own kids that look up to the high schoolers, it's a pretty amazing thing to have you guys with them, I'm sure. And I'm sure the teachers, it must be so gratifying, particularly where you know some of the teachers from years past, and to have you back and to see you in a different capacity than is the little kids that you once were. So fabulous, and glad that's all happening. And also thank you to you, Jen. It really, it's a credit, the number of things that you're able to connect with, like Mass Hire, but also the number of grants and things that you bring, additional programs and things into our district that really benefit, in this case, students across the district, but much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So based on Amanda's comment, one last request. If there is time, can we see them can we see you sort of towards the end of the internship so we can hear more about your experiences?
I'd be happy to come back in.
We would love to
Yeah.
hear
Absolutely.
that.
I'm curious, is there an opportunity for participating districts to then report back to Bessie or like any sort of state level of how the program is running, or does that not happen at the end?
Well, it's interesting because I was thinking as they were speaking tonight that we should take a little portion of the school committee, and I will forward this portion of the meeting to the people who run the grant at DESE and at Mass Hire, so they can have a sense of what it really looks like, because it is fruitful.
Yeah, and the three of you encapsulated, I think, at this point in the program where you are, exactly both sides of the growth for students and for you, and what the program can offer. So that would be great to share.
Great.
How many interns were there last year?
I think they were about 9 or 10.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's great.
similar. And I should acknowledge the teachers who are working with them, and they've put themselves out there, and they're getting a ton of help. But I think at first, when they're signing on to this, and I'm sending them all this paperwork, they're not sure if it's going to be a lot of help or a lot of work. So, but the feedback I've received so far has been very, very positive. So
That's wonderful.
it's been good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So that brings us then into the capital report with Mrs. Rutherford.
Thank you. There's a memo in your packet, just a reminder of the capital projects that have been moved forward, that have been recommended by the town manager. The high school auditorium lighting at $325,000, the wetland order of conditions, $75,000, air handling units at $475,000, and the marathon addition increased funding at $695,000. The proposal for solar projects is moving forward as a power purchase agreement. and this will enable a savings of $3.5 million over the 25 years using the PPA. And there is still a placeholder for increased funding for the middle school and Hopkins roof, as that remains under legal review.
Can I ask a quick question about the solar? I mean, I know we're going forward with the power agreement. I personally, I always prefer to buy. I know we can't this year, but one of the things I'm wondering is, like, if we waited a year, would we be then allowed to purchase it, and would the wait be worth that, or, you know, is the power purchase agreement thing kind of something we really need to move forward with this year?
Well, so the hesitancy on the town side, one is the amount of debt that we're looking, as we're projecting forward, as we're looking at the new Elmwood School. They're also not, more conservative in terms of looking at the revenue. So
So
while
it probably wouldn't change.
I don't think it's going to change on the town side in terms of the philosophy of the debt and the hesitancy around the revenue projections. Power purchase agreement still moves us into a very good place. We continue to look for a lot of different energy models that will continue to bring down our utilities. So this just becomes a piece of the puzzle. So, you know, as we continue.
Yeah, understood. I just wanted to see if there was a way we could purchase, but yeah, if it's clearly a philosophy type thing, then then we should proceed forward.
Can I ask a follow-up on Leah's question? Because when you say the amount of the debt, what I'm hearing and what I'm understanding is that the amount, it's not the ability to cover the debt service, which we had discussed would be able to be done with the amount that we'd be saving if we had purchased, but rather the amount of total debt the town has across all projects and what that would do to our bond rating and whatnot if we went
That's
above
correct,
that.
yeah. So they're looking at the total debt, obviously the debt ceiling, the debt capacity of the town as a whole. And like I said, just being conservative in terms of whether the revenue model would cover that. Their philosophy is that's not the model they want to get into.
Okay.
I
Thank you.
had some similar questions to Dr. Kavanaugh, and also asking if we could stage, because there were several installs bundled into one project. But my only question that you haven't answered yet is, we have a campus planning initiative in a school building, a lot of facilities-related construction. We also are looking at, I believe, traffic and what we might do there. So I know that some of the installs were only the bus parking lot and the parking lot, sort of carport roof, and some of the buildings' roof surfaces. So in the event that we have to disrupt an installation that we've contracted for with the provider, is there some kind of a penalty for us if we have like sort of an interruption of service? We've contracted that we're going to have whatever, I don't know how it goes, but square footage or whatever of solar panels, and if some percentage are temporarily offline, is there a penalty for us for any reason?
There is. But the locations that we are looking at are not locations that would be disrupted by what we're thinking of long-term. So the traffic pattern at the water tower lot would not change. The traffic pattern at the marathon, where we would put and this is speaking for the carports.
Yeah.
The bus lot, those carports are pushed off, really to the both ends, so it does not interfere with traffic. And where we're putting these on the roof would not be where there would be an addition where we would need to disrupt the power to change the roof structure.
Okay. I don't, in that we haven't started the work, I don't know. I know that depending on the outcome of the school configurations with the Elmwood replacement, there may be trickle down investments in, say, the middle school or high school, auditorium or a space so I didn't know if there could potentially be an overlap, but good to know it's been looked at. And I guess it is what it is. I also was hoping that we would purchase and have that asset and that revenue stream, but thank you for doing the work on this.
Yes.
Thank you. Then that brings us into Dr. Kavanaugh's superintendent report.
That we are amazing today. Okay, so this is the superintendent's report from March 17th, 2022. It's going to be very quick tonight, I think. I know last time we were together, I had not given you any COVID information, and the numbers were very, very low then. And we did talk about including COVID numbers in future reports, and so I did want to point this out to you, that in the time period between March 11th to March 17th, we did not have any cases at the high school or middle school. Hopkins was at 4, Marathon was at 5, and at Elmwood the number is 20. And so I think if there are people at home who are watching the dashboard and wondering how did we get to 20. So what we did sort of immediately is we reached out to public health and said, can you kind of help us make heads or tails of this? Because even if we looked at Elmwood classrooms, we weren't finding that there were 4 or 5 or 6 kids contained in one classroom. There was sort of a sprinkling of students across classrooms. And of course, there may be a classroom that has 2 or a classroom that has 3. But we weren't seeing that kind of like cluster in a classroom. At any rate, the Board of Health believes that, or public health officials believe that the high case count at Elmwood probably stems from an outside kind of large gathering that involved children. And so that's why they're thinking some of those numbers are big. They haven't been able to sort of really confirm that. But what was interesting to them is that they didn't know these numbers, and they didn't know these numbers because people are doing at-home tests. So on their end, they could see that there might have been 2 or 3 students who were Elmwood aged, but once our nurse and principal were able to point it out to them, then they could kind of do some, legwork, I think, taking a look to see what was the cause of the 20 at Elmwood. The good news, our public health officials tell us, is that the kids have very, very mild symptoms. All right, this is an exciting event. Leah alluded to it earlier that we had an elementary school building 2 meeting last night. The sort of subgroup that was in charge of getting an owner's project manager in place has done all of its work. I think that we had looked through about 10 bids and invited 4 people in for presentations, and so with MSBA approval, that has to happen all along the way. We are looking at using Compass Project Management, which is very exciting. They worked with us on Marathon as well. And if people are starting to get interested now in the Elmwood project, there is project information on the Hopkinton Public Schools website. If you go under the Elmwood School, or if you're just on the main page and you click on About, you'll see it. And you can see on the lower right-hand side some of the information that's offered there, really just some of the where have we been, where are we going kind of stuff. I don't know if you have anything to add to that part.
No, I mean, the website really is in the very beginning stages. It's really a shell. So I invite the public to continue to go back, because as we move along the process, these pages will start to fill up and really build.
All right, just a quick reminder that kindergarten orientation, Monday, April 4th, Tuesday, April 5th, so people should mark their calendars. That's always a big event, I think, in families' lives. And that you'll be approving, hopefully, a trip for the middle school VEX robotics team to travel along with their high school counterparts. And last time I did include some of the quotes from high school kids, and so Pat Allen, who is the advisor at the middle school, sent me a few, and I couldn't help myself but to include this one. So the writer tells us that it would mean everything to me. The writer started robotics to learn and understand all about the topic, but it not only taught me that, It taught me so many other things like teamwork and communications. My team has thankfully made it to the regionals, which made it one step closer, which made us thirst for more. We are a very ambitious group of people, including me, so it would be a great experience and just purely amazing if we got to go. So I'm selling that product. But it's so lovely to hear the students' voices, it really is. All right, and that's all I have for you.
Questions?
Good.
Okay,
Okay.
great, thank you. So I did the school committee chair report. Are there liaison reports?
I have a couple. Well, I think Dr. Kavanaugh did most of the one for ESBC too. I went to the youth commission meeting, and can't talk about it a lot, but you know, a little hint that there's work being done on the Pride Parade for this year. So we'll talk about that later. On a more serious note, the Youth and Family Services is doing their suicide prevention workshop at the HCA on April 11th between 7 and 8:30 p.m. The focus is on hope and action, and they are doing it at HCA so that there's childcare available. So parents can come, drop off their children, you know, starting at 6:45 p.m.-ish. Right, and then pick them up after the presentation, and that was a big reason for choosing the location.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. So that would be it.
I don't.
Okay. That then, I don't have any liaison reports right now, but we are discussing liaison roles further down in the agenda. Brings us into new business item A, which is the robotics final travel approval. Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, teed up nicely. So Pat Allen at the middle school is looking for your approval to bring her robotics kids, 4 teams I think, who have made it this far in the VEX competitions to Texas on Saturday, May 7th or Sunday, May 8th, depending on flight availability, and they will be returning on May 11th.
I would like to make a motion. Can I make a motion?
You can make a
I
motion.
would like to make a motion to approve this trip.
Okay.
I will second that motion.
Motion by Amanda, second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. I also just want to give a shout out for our robotics program in general. I know that at our last meeting we had approved for the high school as well. It's a credit to our district that we have so many teams from the middle school and the high school going to the world final. So, okay, that brings us into we are going to pass over item B for tonight. That brings us into item C, which is additional high school and middle school track and field coaches.
Okay.
Dr. Cameron.
All right, and that one is mine too. You do have a memo from Rich Cormier, our athletic director. And you know what he's really looking at, he tells us that the high school track team currently has 220 student athletes registered and 6 coaches, and the middle school track team has 110 student athletes registered and 3 coaches. And just sort of as a matter of safety, he's looking for a couple of additional coaches this spring, just to ensure that we are lowering that kind of coach to ratio number, and if these numbers continue, we'll probably be looking for these positions permanently in the future. But for right now, we are just, kind of covering the spring and seeing where it goes. He's thinking that kids are signing up for this because after COVID, they're all looking to do something and get out there. It's a no-cut sport, and it's really just great for kids to get out and do something with their peers and get some exercise. It's a good thing.
I make a motion to approve the additional track and field coaches for the 2022 season.
I'll second that, but can I have discussion?
Absolutely.
I'll second that motion. I just wanted to point out that I did, through Dr. Kavanaugh, ask a few questions just about the logistics of managing 220 track athletes. Like, how many buses does that mean we take to the meets? Like, I mean, that's a huge number of athletes. I'm thrilled that they are so engaged with the extracurricular programs and the athletics. I'm not, I love it. I think it's great. And I think they, obviously with that kind of a head count, we need more adults to ensure that they're safe and productive at the time. But I did ask, you know, is this the right, do we have the right structure of this program? Like, we don't cut, I mean, I don't know how it actually works, but I just want to make sure it's feasible. And so for this year, I absolutely want to add the coaches, but I encourage us to just look and make sure that we are structured in the right way. And if we maybe also want to add like a running club, I mean, I don't know if there's this much activity. I don't know how many students would be happy with another kind of similar outlet. It just seems like a very large cohort. Yeah. So I'm thrilled to approve this for this year, and if it works, it's great. But if there's an opportunity to relook, I'd be happy to entertain a conversation on that too.
I have to say that I always appreciate your outlook on this because as not an athlete, I don't immediately think of all the things that go into, you know, getting kids to and from athletic programs and things like that. And so I appreciate you bringing that up. That's really thoughtful. I hadn't thought about it.
How many buses is that?
At least
56 middle and high school bodies can fit on a 77 passenger.
It is impressive.
It's
exciting though.
Yeah, it is, and I think he said there aren't all that many meets that because a lot of them happen on the weekends, I think too. Or there weren't that many. It wasn't like a whole season of games like for basketball.
Yeah, summer by invitation.
And summer by invitation.
Yes.
That was it. But it's a lot of athletes.
Yes.
It's exciting, but that's a long track meet.
One thing I can say, having a child who has done track, is that the nice thing is because you have long distance, mid distance, sprinters, track, field events. So it's almost like multiple practices happening at the same time. And even during the meets, some things are happening simultaneously. So I do think the addition of the coaches is going to be really helpful to help them kind of get the full effect of the work that they need to do. But you can't, fudge the numbers on the numbers of bodies on a bus. For sure, they still have to get somewhere.
We ready to vote?
Yes.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
It is unanimous. And good luck to all of our track and field athletes with such a packed season.
Well, thank you.
That brings us into item D, which is the gifted and talented report.
So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind doing a policy or two before that, because Vanessa Bilello, the principal at Hopkins,
Oh,
is planning
absolutely.
to join us. And
Absolutely.
I think I had told her
Okay.
that once the concert ended,
Yep.
if she could get here by 8,
All
she
right,
would
so
be
we
getting plenty
will-
of time. So
We
she
can
should be
circle
here
that
shortly.
back. Yep. So let's start with policy ECAF then, which is the security cameras in schools. This is a third reading. Did you receive any feedback on that? I saw it went out by listserv to the community.
Security cameras, no.
So what we did do as a policy committee was just add, at the last meeting, Joe mentioned that there might be concerns about privacy and that we should think about cameras as kind of further along the pipeline, that there should be, student discussions and things like that before you get to using the cameras. So since it's a policy, we can't go into great detail on that, but we did add, however, the district will make every effort to preserve student and staff privacy in here with the understanding that then the procedure would reflect that.
I appreciate that addition.
Yeah, I do too. I think the edits are appropriate and reflect the spirit of the discussion from the last meeting. I'm also thankful that this is coming forward because I think, as I'm recalling from the beginning of my school committee days, I think the camera installation was the result of a security audit that occurred about maybe, 5 or 6 years ago in the wake of some school shootings and so forth. And I know the district was very proactive in having an external company come out and do an audit of our facilities, and I'm sure Susan could speak more to this, but so as a result of that work, we have systematically been installing security measures of a wide variety, as is mentioned in the policy. And these are already in place. They've been in place because this is, what we had done in response to that audit. So I feel a little bit guilty that we didn't bring this policy forward sooner because I think this is just very transparent to say that we have these cameras and they're there for good reason and they'll be used with intent by appropriate personnel only when needed. So I appreciate you bringing this forward.
And I know there were questions about cost, but at this point, the installation is complete. So really, we're just in a place of maintenance.
Yeah.
I do also appreciate, I think we don't like to think about these larger security issues that we've seen nationwide in schools, and we like to feel like in Hopkinton, we're a very safe community. We're consistently rated as safe as a community, not just as a school district, but it does, it gives me some peace of mind as a parent to know that there are ways that we are able to work with the police and with having these cameras in place to keep our students safe if, God forbid, there was any kind of an external threat coming in our schools. So. Are we ready to approve the policy? Anybody feel moved to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I would like to move to accept the policy as edited by the policy subcommittee and presented tonight.
Second.
Motion by Amanda and a second by Leah. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimously passes. Thank you, as always, to our little policy group. It has been, I know, a lot of work.
Little being the operative word.
Little for now, but I know that it has been bigger at different points. So that then brings us into policy JBB, educational equity, fifth reading. I know there were some edits that I saw had been made to this, but do you want to highlight what the edits are for the community, but also if there was any feedback from the community?
Well, this may go very quickly. We have had no feedback from the community, but when Leah and I met this week to look this over, one of the things that we talked about was bringing it back to some of the people who are working on the insides of our organization. And so we ran it by Jen, who works very closely with our other Jen Suker, who is the Director of Equity and Access. And what I think we're going to do going forward is just to have a day where Jen Suker, Jen Parson, Leah, and I can all meet together to see if this policy as written seems to be in sync with some of the work that we are doing in the district, because we would want for our work to continue to evolve on the trajectory that we've set for it, but we just want to make sure that a policy and our work aren't sort of in conflict with each other. So I think we can just let that, and then we can probably get started. And I think I just heard the elevator, which means Vanessa might be here.
Okay. Do you want to roll the dice and go ahead and get started?
I will.
Okay.
I think I'm going to go over to that side of the table, and Vanessa will join us over there as well.
Right on
And
cue.
it's impeccable.
Excellent.
How was the concert first?
It was fantastic. It was very special for sure. 2 years from just about tonight. We were the first thing I think canceled our concert. And we canceled the winter one, so this is our first one in 2 years. It was very special.
Congratulations. It has been fabulous all week to see photos popping up of concerts across the district. It does feel nice to be able to be back in a more normal.
It was awesome. The kids were wonderful and it was really special. So, and I got to play a little sax with them. Ended with "We Will Rock You."
Was that your solo?
We did have a solo group.
All right, well, thank you for giving us the opportunity. Mrs. Parson, Mrs. Bilello, and I will all be contributing to this. I'll get started, and then we'll kind of work our way down the table. And I know that people are wondering in the community, what is it that we do to address the needs of our high-achieving learners? And so that's really what we've titled this report tonight. And as we in Hopkinton plan our educational programs that are really designed to prepare kids for life after the Hopkinton Public Schools, all kids, all 4,050-ish of them, we do so with the aim of addressing the multifaceted needs of all students. And so we really want people to understand that our goal is always to be able to reach our highest achievers, our kids who have very different interests in something outside of the curriculum, our kids who are struggling readers, writers, mathematicians. So we really look at every single child. and to define our district's philosophy and our approaches to teaching and learning. So tonight I hope you're going to see some of our philosophy and the ways that we approach teaching and learning. This work isn't new work. It's been going on for hundreds of years in the United States. I pulled this stuff from the ASCD website, and so you can see here that in 1818, Thomas Jefferson was weighing in on the objects of primary education. In 1918, you can see that the National Education Association was listing several aims in its report. So people are always thinking, what is it that we should be teaching kids? What kinds of ways do we mold kids and shape them? And so here in Hopkinton, we are really no different. And so tonight, I hope you're going to be able to see some of what we believe in. We believe in educating the whole child. There are, schools, I think, that are designed around STEM and STEAM and drama and all of that kind of stuff. We are really a comprehensive school system, and we believe in educating the whole child. And the graphic that you see on there comes from the Learning Policy Institute. So we are about things like mental health, social emotional development, developing a healthy identity, academic development, cognitive development, physical health, all of those things, alongside pieces like equity and community and environment and relationships. So it's a really big task, I think, if you are going to commit to educating the whole child. We believe in teaching the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks or the advanced placement curricula, wherever one of our kids happens to land. And DESE really is in control, largely, of what sort of happens at the local level. Yes, they give us frameworks, and from those frameworks, we write our own curricula. All right, and then finally, we believe in knowing children as individual learners and addressing those individual needs. And I think over the last 5 years, we've gotten better and better at really addressing individual needs and understanding who kids are. We've brought in means of assessing kids in ELA and math, and that goes all the way from kindergarten to grade 10. And we're constantly revisiting that data. Mrs. Bolello may tell you about the data sheets that she keeps on kids. We really do know all of their scores, where they're growing, how they're achieving, whether they're not achieving. And we look at that stuff, and it really does drive our instruction. So if you're a parent who said, "Ooh, my kids went to the Hopkinton Public Schools 15 years ago, and I don't think that we had any kind of differentiation in the classroom," maybe there wasn't as much differentiation, because in the last 5 years, we have made a really strong concerted effort to do that. So at this time, we do believe that we offer a cell-infused, standards-based instruction, differentiated pretty well alongside highly engaging extracurriculars that help our students to grow intellectually, socially, and emotionally. All right, and I wanted to go back to our district plan, because I think our district strategy is really important. This was developed several years ago. And as you look at that piece about individual pathways, we have a philosophy about that, and we adhere to that philosophy, and I think we've made it very public year in and year out. So I'll leave the enrollment growth alone, we know about that, and I'll just go to the valuing of individual pathways. We very specifically divided this into 3 buckets. And what we believe is that the Hopkinton Public Schools is committed to advancing learning for all, centering first on learning foundational skills within a community. That community piece is it's huge for us. We like to have all of our kids, and I think even our student interns tonight talked about it a little bit, having kids under one roof, some kids who are struggling, some kids who are advanced. I think Cy talked about teachers building enrichment when, he would be with some of the students, so that gives the teachers some time to be freed up. And I think he's at Elmwood. Is that right, Jim?
Marathon.
Marathon. Thank you. And gradually introducing more diverse pathways as students mature and near graduation. We pledge an investment in students' social, emotional, behavioral, and physical wellness, and hope to graduate well-balanced young adults who take risks, think independently, and persevere. We hope to grow students who are passionate about learning, who believe anything is possible, and who care for themselves and others, honoring diversity and fostering inclusivity. So that has been around for a very long time, and I think at the start of it, you can see that in the elementary grades, and you'll see tonight that I think differentiation is very different, K to 5, from what it looks like 6 to 12. But in the elementary grades, what we do is largely foundational, with an eye toward where students are, for sure. And then after maybe like grade 3, kids start to sort of better identify themselves as individuals. There are things that they can pursue, and by the time our kids are in high school, they really have opportunities to do some pretty amazing things. Maybe VEX Robotics is a good example of that. And then the last one of the buckets in our strategic objectives is to build school communities of collaboration. While it might be easy to focus on academic successes alone, the Hopkinton Public Schools believes in helping children develop a capacity for kindness, respect, compassion, and service to others. We strive for vertical alignment of programs and services to ensure equity from school to school, classroom to classroom. We believe in collaborative learning and fostering the growth of relational competencies. Students must understand how others live and build relationships across race, class, gender, and learning abilities to create caring learning communities. And again, I think that that's what's happening, and especially in our K-5 classrooms where kids of all abilities gather under one roof. And this occurs best when we also have strong relationships between families and schools.
Could I pipe in a little here?
Oh, yeah, jump right in.
So I wanted to bring you back to when my colleagues and I presented our school improvement plans back in the fall, and you may remember that all of us spoke to different pathways and talked about differentiation. And I think Hopkins' school improvement plan sort of illuminates how important we think differentiation is. If you might recall that we had 2 goals, our social emotional learning goal, and that whole second goal was all about differentiated instruction across curricular areas and making sure that all students have access to that high quality instruction, but to meet the needs of individual learners academically. And so we talk about things like choice and voice. We talk about looking at data to make sure that each student is supported but also challenged to achieve. And we really are looking at a lot of different ways and pathways to provide personalized learning. So that's one of the reasons I'm not here just representing Hopkins, but really as that middle child. But this is work that we're doing in all of the schools, and all 5 of us as building principals working in collaboration with central office to find those ways to differentiate instruction. So I think when you look into our individual school improvement plans, you can see how committed we are as building leaders and central office to collaborate on this work, because we know how important it is.
So I did want to return to the definition of gifted and talented, and the NAGC, the definition there is gifted individuals are those who demonstrate outstanding levels of aptitude, defined as exceptional ability to reason and learn, or competence, documented performance or achievement in top 10 or rarer in one or more domains. And we certainly don't, we don't argue with that definition. We have a lot of kids who are, very high achieving. I think we'll see tonight that we probably have more than our top 10% of kids who are really high achieving, and that's wonderful. One of the other things that website will tell us is that in schools the term gifted recognizes exceptionality in aptitude or achievement that requires appropriately differentiated services in order for the students to develop to their potential. And we like to think that if we are not already as fully differentiated as we might be, that is the goal that we continue to take, especially as you see it manifest in our school improvement plans and our district strategy. So I want to talk about what that looks like within the context of the Hopkinton Public Schools. If we say we are differentiating, what does that actually mean? So I want to start with who learns here, and you'll only see 3 students' profiles in here. We removed one for the sake of making this a little shorter because it's long. But you can see the star reading scores for these students, and they are all 4th grade students. So here is a student who is landing in the yellow, and the yellow means that student in reading is partially meeting expectations. The instructional reading level for that student is grade 3.5, even though the student is in grade 4, and the zone of proximal development for the student is anywhere between 2.9 and 4.2.
I'm sorry, Dr. Kavanaugh. What does that mean, zone of proximal development?
Thank you.
So you're going to be wanting to look for instructional materials that are in that range, because depending on their exposure, their knowledge of that subject matter, they are going to work somewhere in that range. So when you're
grade
grade
level.
level, exactly.
Like 2.9 is like
End of
advanced
second
second
grade.
grader.
Exactly.
I
So
gotcha.
according to STAR, it's saying that they're going to be working with texts in that range, but their comprehension, their vocabulary, their knowledge of that subject matter, obviously if they're working with science and they're a student who's got a great deal of interest in science, they're going to have more background knowledge in that area. Whereas if it's about poetry, it might be something that they need to work at the lower level of that ZPD. That-
And for people that are watching, it may be difficult to see at home, but there is a very faint dotted line. So if you're wondering how you know that student landed in the yellow, there is a faint line that does show that.
Thank you. All right, and here is another student. This student is in the blue, the faint dotted line right there, which indicates that that student is meeting expectations, but has just probably passed over that cusp from the yellow into the blue. The instructional reading level is 4.9, so that student is pretty much exactly where they should be. And the zone of proximal development for that student is 3.6 to 5.6. And I guess to sort of piggyback on what Vanessa just shared, if you're going to be choosing materials, say we go back to the 2.9, maybe for something like poetry because there's less familiarity with it, or you go up higher with the science because the student has sort of those mental pegs to, hang new information on, you really have to know the kids. And that's a really important piece of this, is that we are in a place where we are really getting to know our kids. And so here is the third person that we're showing you. And this third student is really far into the green. And that student is ranked in the 99th percentile. The zone of proximal development could be anywhere between 4.9 and 11.9. And the instructional reading level is at 10.2.
So I like to caution that though this is a standardized test and it's obviously computer-based, there are some cautions here. So if you have a fourth grader who's at this level, they may be able to decode that text. And a lot of the questions on STAR really look at their ability to analyze and figure out language and look at comprehension structures. But obviously you also have to take into account themes and where that is developmentally. So as you get into much more sophisticated text, you're looking at themes like war and other topics that certainly a fourth grader may be able to read the words on the page, but they're not developmentally ready for. So while it says up there 10.2, you're not going to be putting Grapes of Wrath in front of a fourth grader, even if they can read those words, because there's so many concepts in there that are going to be well beyond what they should be looking at and thinking about.
So I have a quick question. As a mother of two 2E children, that test, is it like a multiple choice test? Is it a writing test? Because I had a child who was reading at 12th grade level in 5th grade, but could not write an essay, right?
Absolutely.
And it was actually a hand problem, like it's an actual tendon problem that he has. So how does this get measured, and how do you make sure that?
Great question, because that is one of the common things that we hear from families. They'll say, oh, well, look on the standardized test, they're at the 99th percentile. And we always like to then sit down with the families and look at all of the data, because we do a lot of, you'll hear that language, triangulation. So this is one measure. At the winter time when students are doing this on a computer-based test, that's one component. We use a QRI, which is a group administered test where they're silently reading. And then answering short answer questions. And then we also use the BAS, which is individually administered, where students are working with a teacher and answering comprehension questions orally. Some students are, as you know, very uncomfortable in that face-to-face interaction. We saw even more of that over this last year. So it was really important to look at all three data points together to understand somebody as a reader. And writing, especially as you start to move up from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, becomes a huge component. So a lot of times families will say to us, my child can read Harry Potter. We say, absolutely, we don't disagree with that. But being able to analyze all of the themes within Harry Potter and then write about it is taking it to a whole nother level. And that's our job as educators, is to look at all of those pieces of information and figure out where do we need to embed instruction for that child. And that's where we use things like the literacy continuum to understand this is where the child is right now, and the next levels of understanding are going to come as I teach and talk about these topics and conversations and build these themes in for this child to work with. Does that make sense? So it's not one, it's one data point of many that we use, and that's why we keep data sheets so that we can sit and talk as teachers and in PLCs and with other administrators about how to meet the needs of each of those children.
Yeah, and I think interestingly too, while in class, you get qualitative data. You know, you can look at the reading behaviors of kids, and you can also see that you could have this particular student in the 99th percentile who has really very little interest in reading, and just a super competent reader, but could take it or leave it. You know, there may be some other passion for this particular student. So that's why I think it's just so important to be able to kind of know them.
But they're selecting responses on the STAR versus creating them, which I think was part of the question you were asking.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like my child, for instance, would do well in a multiple choice like this, but in a short essay would do
Yes.
poorly. And part of it was he didn't want to write. Like, he could analyze. Like, if he was talking to you one-on-one, you would be like, wow, he really understands that text. But when he tried to put it to paper, it bothered his arms so much and his hands. And he went to OT all the time for it that he couldn't show it on paper, right? So that's why that's very interesting, the multiple ways that you have to assess that.
So another thing that we looked at in STAR, because we were wondering how many students are reading at the 90th percentile or above. And so at the Hopkins School, on the last iteration of the STAR, which was January,
Yes.
13.5% of fourth grade students are reading at the 90th percentile or above. So that means seventh grade or above is what that means. And so if we take our 13.5% of the kids, and let's, for the sake of easy math, say that there are 300 of them in the fourth grade, we're looking at 41 students who are spread out over 14 classrooms. So when we put kids into classrooms, it's not willy-nilly, it's not alphabetical. I can tell you that as recently as last Friday, the 3 elementary school principals were having conversations about placement. Placement takes them hours and hours and hours to ensure that a composition is going to work well for the person who's in there who has to deliver instruction to groups of people. And it doesn't just mean academically. It means how will these kids get along socially? How are these kids motivated to learn or not motivated to learn? All of that is taken into consideration. And maybe at this point it makes sense to have Vanessa talk a little bit about how those compositions, if you're careful about them, if you've got your 13.5% or 41 kids, there's actually a large enough cohort to build curriculum specifically for your advanced learners.
Yeah, I think having had the opportunity to work in Hopkinton now for 8 years and spent time in Palo Alto, California, which is a very similar community to this, where you have such a cohort of very strong students who come into our schools, blessed with a lot of background knowledge and experiences from their families, and then incredible educations, where you have such a large cohort, you don't have to develop specific programs in the same way because we're talking about 10 to 20% of our students who are performing at this high level. And so therefore we have to look at classrooms that are meeting the needs. That's 15% of our students. We have to figure out ways to make sure that they're coming together to work together. So even though they're across all the classrooms, we do a lot of flexible grouping because as you spoke about, those students are not evenly distributed. It's a very rare student who is going to be at the 95th, 99th percentile across all of the domains, whether it's reading, writing, and math. That's an even more rare situation, right? Because usually people have some levels of strength and weaknesses. So by doing flexible grouping, we can bring students together from different classrooms to work in reading groups. So when we are doing work leveled, we can bring 4, 6 students from 2 classrooms because we will frequently have that. So at the 4th grade, we might have in 2 classrooms 5 or 6 students who are working at a V reading level that is like a 7th grade reading level. Again, we're not going to put something like Anne Frank necessarily in front of them because it's not appropriate for where their conceptual understanding is and those themes are really deep. But the teacher is going to know to be targeting and nurturing those students at that level where they are with comprehension, while another group of students from those same 2 classrooms is working with text maybe at a 3rd grade level. That is one of the beauties of Hopkinton education, we have such diversity in that learning, and by doing flexible grouping, we can meet those needs. We can cluster students together in a way where a district that might only have 3% of these learners across all of those classrooms, how do you make sure they come together? You might have to create a separate program, for example, right? But we have that beauty that it's 15% of our students.
So, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna, I don't usually share maybe personal comments, but I would just say that we moved to Hopkinton from a district that had the SAGE program, and both of my sons were in that program. But I think as you just exactly as you said, the demographics are different, the need was different, and the priority, for one individual family, was to find a district of cohort, a cohort that is so large in the district where the need that was being met by the gifted program was not as important as the rich environment in which my kids, could be here. So, in my personal experience, it played out very much like you just said,
Right.
For both my kids.
So,
I think
I
the
know
first
I'm
one's the next
asking
slide.
a
No,
ton
that's
of
okay.
questions. So one thing that is usually different with gifted learners, right, is you're talking about level of like themes and enrichment, and gifted learners, whether they're high performing or not, have a tendency to be the ones that do dig in and have the
Hyperfixated.
yeah.
Hyperfixated?
Yeah,
Or really focused in certain areas of interest? Or?
Not just that. It's the curiosity, the challenging, the asking like questions that are deeper than you'd expect from a child. That no matter how they're performing academically, right? There's kind of the existential crises that happen much earlier than you expect in other children. So how does like you keep discussing appropriate themes, but if you have a child who is asking slightly more mature questions and pushing into slightly more mature areas, how do you handle that sort of thing?
Well, that is the advantage of still doing leveled groupings, which is not all of the experience a student would have at 4th or 5th grade or 3rd grade. We do book clubs, which might be heterogeneous group mixed over, I mentioned choice and voice. So we might have a group of students who are really interested in learning about a certain culture. I know there's a book club book from Pakistan that some of our students are using right now. So if they had interest, they might be immersed in that, or they might be interested in the genre of poetry, and so they're going into that in the book club. But we also do guided reading experiences that are more leveled. So again, if you're pulling some of those more sophisticated thinkers from across classrooms, the teacher can have more deep conversations. That is the beauty of what we call Fontes and Pinnell's literacy continuum, because when you look at that, it's not just can they decode the text, it's not just can they read it with fluency, it's also looking at all of these other aspects of reading comprehension, which includes various topics and getting more and more sophisticated as you go deeper into the continuum. And so for your higher students, something like the literacy continuum is going to help the teacher develop the kind of prompting questions and supportive environment to do that in a developmentally appropriate way. So I find the literacy continuum to be a very useful tool that our teachers dig into frequently, especially for those kind of outlier students, to figure out how do I appropriately move them to the next level. Does that help?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I think too, when we talk about sort of appropriate themes, I don't even know if appropriate is the exact word. I think sometimes thematically there are things that will go over kids' heads, so to speak. So if you went back to Grapes of Wrath, it's probably not written at a really high lexile level, right? A lot of kids could access that text, all 619 pages of it. But there are genres embedded in there, like there's prose poetry sections, or there's deep economic structures in there, there's biblical allusion in there, there's all kinds of things that kids may not see in their 4th grade reading of that text. And I think that if you're going to try to get kids to start looking at things like, controlling symbols or whatever, it makes sense to do it in a way that they're going to be able to kind of access it in a lived experience kind of way. Like they don't have the lived experience, I think, to be able to access something like Grapes of Wrath. Certainly they can read it, they can understand the plot, but there would be pieces missing for some kids, even if they're reading in the 99th percentile. But, you know, maybe for others not so. I mean, some kids may have the pegs to hang that learning on, so. All right, here's a really amazing statistic, and as I pulled this one, I have to confess today when I was reviewing this with Lauren, I said, oh my gosh, can you believe it? I think she was a little bit horrified because she was like, of course I can believe it. We're doing a lot of good work here. But this number is, I mean, I said it in a way that I was just delighted, but it didn't come out that way. But 41% of our first grade students right now are reading above the 90th percentile. 41%. So that's 123 kids in grade 1 on that winter test across 14 classrooms are reading at the 90th percentile or above. That's outstanding. Like, I don't think that happens in a lot of places. So as Lauren's creating reading situations, she can, you know, really offer a lot of kids some high-level reading. And I think, you know, we're really lucky that our kids come to school in Hopkinton with, you know, a lot of letter recognition, letter sounds, that kind of stuff. But over the past 5 years, the literacy programming at the elementary level that we have been developing is like putting us into places that we never dreamt we could go. So this is very exciting. So then people will wonder, if you have these kids who are achieving at such high levels, are they actually still making growth, or is there a place where these kids are going to plateau? And so what I've done is I've included here some information, and this is all of the, I think it's just the third grade classrooms nope, it's 30 classes. So you've got all of the second and the third grade classes at Elmwood. And what you're seeing here on the y-axis is the achievement level, but what you're seeing here on the x-axis is the growth. And so if these kids were starting in really high places, are they still growing faster than their peers across Massachusetts or across the nation who would appear in these STAR reports? And as you can see, what you would want is you would want your classrooms to all be clustered in this upper right-hand quadrant so that you're indicating high achievement and also very high growth. And so this is working. It's working that our kids are growing and they're achieving, and we are able here to foster inclusion, not exclusion. And we're really proud of that work.
And can I just remind you, for those of you at home who are not familiar with SGP, when we're looking at that, it's really a band. So unlike trying to think about 99th percentile where we want everyone to be, growth SGPs are a little bit different. And so we're really shooting for a 40 to 60 band. We want to see classrooms or students to land at least between 40 and 60 as in terms of their growth, because this is measuring them against other children around the country or around the state, depending on which measures. I believe this is state-based.
State-based.
So this specific view is showing compared to other students around the state who were performing at the same achievement level, how much growth do they make? So the fact that there's that many classrooms of children that are above 60 is really phenomenal. That means our high performing students are still making incredible growth compared to other high performing students in other like districts or other, you know, similar achievement levels.
Is that like 50%? Is that, like, what does the 50 mean?
Yeah, I can kind of define that. The way that MCAS first started doing this in Massachusetts, so what they would do is they'd have a cohort. So imagine that in third grade I scored a 260, and then in fourth grade a 270, and then in fifth grade a 262, and then whatever. And Vanessa had the exact same scores that I did, and Jen had the exact same scores. We would fall into a cohort. So as that cohort kept growing, what would happen is the next time we took the MCAS test, if we got different scores this time, they would rank order us. And so every one of us would fall into some kind of a decile. So your growth percentile score is all about where you land. So what we would want our kids to do in that rank order is to always be above 50%. Yeah. Yeah. All right, and here is one that is showing math at the middle school. And I included this because...
It didn't switch.
I'm sorry. You did.
Oh, it's all right. It didn't.
Okay.
I was seeing extra blue.
There's a lot of bubbles.
A lot of bubbles everywhere. And so what we're seeing here, this is very interesting. What we're seeing here down below, these bubbles here, because you can see that there are 39 classes here, but some of these are, some of our small group math where kids are really struggling. And then you can see our highest achievers up here. And so what you'll notice though is regardless of where that achievement sort of falls, if you look at our kids relative to other kids across the state of Massachusetts, they are moving to sort of that right of that band that Vanessa just described for you. And that's what you hope. You hope that the growth is there. Because what it's indicating is that they started somewhere and they're doing better than their peers.
So that shows that Hopkinton Middle School is doing an incredible job of making all children grow, because almost every one of those bubbles is not only at the 40, but the vast majority are at the 50 and beyond. And look at how many are clustered 70 and beyond. So the students at Hopkinton Middle School, regardless of where they are in achievement, are all showing tremendous growth.
And I really appreciate this because coming from a state that had a gifted program and my kids had a GIEP, one of the primary things that you do with your GIEP is you make sure that you measure the beginning of the year and that the child is growing to the end of the year. And so you want those measurements at either end to show that, yes, the GIEP has done its job and your child is grown. So these numbers mimic that pretty well.
Right. And again, in a place where there's only a few students, you would need to perhaps set up individual plans. In a district like ours, what we do instead is we hold data review meetings. So next week, I'll be meeting with my 4th grade teachers, and we'll be looking at this data together as a classroom, a teacher and me sitting down to figure out where do we have to make those adjustments and plan for those cohorts of students. And we do that all year round at all of the schools.
Just for clarification, a GIEP sounds like it's something that would be not for children who need special education,
Right.
but for children who are
right.
advanced learners
So there's-
regardless of.
Right, so there's an individual education plan that happens for special needs children,
Yep.
and then there's a GIEP, so a gifted individual education plan for a gifted student. And there's all kinds of strategies that go into that, like compacting and things like that. But one of the big measures that you have in a GIEP always is the growth. You need that number because you want to make sure that your child, who is a high-performing child, or I hate that word because, once again, having 2 kids, my kids were not, great grades or anything like that, but they were exceedingly curious, questioned everything, had very quirky ways of looking at the world, like, they fit this gifted paradigm. But either way, if you had a child within that, one of the ways you would measure that the GIEP was working was beginning of year and end of year testing, right, to ensure that the child actually grew, because that's the big problem, right? You see a gifted child, and I'm using gifted because everyone uses gifted in all these states, but the gifted child has a tendency to plateau, right? In most normal classrooms, there's not enough enrichment, there's not enough challenge, and the child may even get bored and withdraw. And to me, that's my biggest worry. It's not, there is the worry of the child who is high performing and has the high grades and needs the extra challenge, but my biggest worry is always the underperforming child, the one who has the ability but has withdrawn.
So I hope you can hear me talking about those multiple data review times where we sit with teachers, because you mentioned 2, beginning of the year, end of the year. Here we are in March, and this will be, we've had multiple points throughout the year that we're sitting with the teachers to discuss data. So we're doing it 4 or 5 times a year where we're sitting down and examining that same growth data. And that's the advantage of all of the assessments that we've put into place in Hopkinton, because we can look at growth all of the time. We're constantly measuring growth and achievement both.
Good.
I have in my head, although it's not up here, the whole child education graphic, Dr. Kavanaugh, that you had in the beginning. And for me, like the one, really critical parental takeaway that I had from exposure to a gifted program as a parent was how to support all of those bubbles in that chart for the whole child. So a huge takeaway for me was looking at the whole child. And it's with kids who excel in certain areas, it's easy to sort of capitalize on that and kind of promote that. And I think one thing I appreciate about the district in particular is buoying and supporting all those other aspects of human growth and development, which make the graduate, like these kids who came before us tonight, these capable, articulate, intelligent, curious human beings. And so I value the approach that you take.
Thank you. All right, so I'll just talk a little bit about the high school, and part of me thinks there's not a whole lot that we should even have to say about the high school because the opportunities there are amazing. I mean, I think you can take almost any class in the whole wide world. Yeah. Yes. We have a spokesperson with us tonight. And, in terms of athletics and art and robotics, and there are just so many extracurriculars, there are so many great courses, as part of the curriculum, the regular school day. But I will just quickly look at this. So our Mcat Scores in the spring of 2021, 33% of our kids were exceeding expectations. So that's about 100 kids there. And in math, 34% were exceeding expectations. Again, about 100 students. So our kids are still performing at very high levels. And I get that MCAS is really very baseline. When I look at these National Merit Scholarship recognitions, you can see that these are kids here who really ended up, kind of in that tippy top. So we have 14 students who are commended, 4 semifinalists and 2 finalists. It's very hard for you to get that letter from the National Merit Scholars. It comes as a result of your performance on the PSAT. And then we have just some AP data here. So the number that the College Board would deem AP scholars, and an AP scholar is someone who gets a 3 or better on 3 exams. We have 62 of them. AP scholars with honors, you got a 3 or better on 4 or more AP exams. And AP scholars with distinction, you get a 3 or better on 5 or more AP exams. And so you can see that we have lots of kids who are taking those AP exams. And at Hopkinton High School, they're not just taking them, but our AP score among these scholars was at 3.98. So I love the 3.98 because that lets us know that our teachers and our students are doing some pretty good things in our AP classes, which is sort of a form, I think, of differentiation at the high school level. I think our kids wouldn't come to us and say, those AP courses are a breeze. I'm just whizzing through them, and there's no challenge, no rigor, and nothing to challenge, to get me sort of thinking at different levels. I think that's what happens in our AP courses. So I'm going to have Vanessa run through what does differentiation look like, but I did want to share this slide with you, which of course you can't read a word of. But what DESE does for us is it takes all of the ELA standards and it puts them out there vertically. So if we took, for example, the speaking and listening standards, what is on that screen right now is what does the speaking and listening standard look like for grade 3? What does it look like for grade 4? What does it look like for grade 5? So it's really helpful, I think, when you're differentiating, because I could have a student in 3rd grade and say, wow, this kid is so articulate and so amazing when he contributes to classroom conversations, and as a 3rd grader, he's advancing the discussion on different topics. And so then I can go through those standards and say, well, if I used it almost in the form of a rubric, where does this child land? Is he working at a grade 4 level, grade 5 level? And obviously this would go all the way to the 12th grade. I mean, we might have a student who can, in 3rd grade, who can contribute to classroom discussions in ways that, reflect 6th grade experience. So I wanted to show you that, but they have them for reading, writing, speaking, listening, the whole 9 yards, and they're really helpful as we differentiate. So I will let you talk about some of the things that your teachers put together to share tonight.
Sure, and any of my colleagues could have been here. I think because I'm the middle child, Dr. Kavanaugh
I
is
pick on her.
letting me come to share, but I think this is just a representation of the kinds of things that Hopkinton Public Schools are doing to meet the needs of all of our students. I asked Dr. Kavanaugh to put this one up here because I wanted to thank you for supporting us in getting a math coach. We have a full-time math coach that was something that we came before you as central office and elementary administrators asking for, and it has been instrumental. Shelly Moran is now full-time as a math coach K-5. She is in all the classrooms. She has been teaching at Elmwood, teaching at Marathon. She comes in and models lessons, and one of her big pieces, we have math tutors working with struggling students, we have students working in differentiated groups, but Shelley has been really supporting curriculum team leaders and working alongside teachers to model how to think deeply, to think about the math practice standards, which are much more than just computation. And I think oftentimes family comes to us and says, my child is in Russian math. And I get that. I've had a child going through Russian math all the way as well, too. And I found it to be a great, enriching extracurricular activity for her. But in school, one of our responsibilities with the math standards is to think about all of the math practice standards. And that includes discourse and talking about math, talking with each other, struggling about math, being able to think about reasonableness, thinking about number sense, and Shelley has really helped bring that into our classrooms and helping provide and create various extension work for our students who need to stretch the band and go deeper thinking, find ways to connect those students together so that they can work at a much deeper level on understanding. And so this is a good example of the kinds of things she would be pushing out activities to teachers and ideas that within our math workshop. So again, we use a reader's workshop model, we use a math workshop model so that we can meet the needs of all of the students in a classroom. So Carol, if you go to the next slide, this is a good example of a fifth grade classroom. I talk about a workshop model. Again, if you think about within 2 classrooms, 50 children at fifth grade, because there's about 25 per classroom right now. So if you're talking about 6 or 7 or even 8 of those students, again, who are 90, really honestly in math, maybe 95th to 97th percentile, 99th percentile students, you have a cohort there to work with. And so you can see over there the orange, the blue, and the yellow. Those would be this teacher's groups for the day. And so students are identifying, they know their group. And as you can see, each one of those is working in a different flow for that math period. But you can see Mrs. Callinan is working with each of those groups at different times. And Mrs. Callinan actually has flipped her classroom. She was one of our remote teachers last year. She actually videotapes herself teaching, because one of the things we know about math is that just like everything else, but students acquire the knowledge at different rates. So some students are going to not need 30-minute lessons. They can move through very quickly and then move into their practice work to demonstrate understanding. If they do that at a high level, then they're able to move on to enrichment. So a good example of that might be the blue group here. So the estimating experts. That group, if you can see up there, I know it's small, but the video and Schoology. So that's actually Mrs. Callinan teaching that lesson. Students can move through it at their pace. Then they're moving into their independent practice. So they get their problem set. If they show full understanding and mastery in their problem sets, then they're moving on to Freckle. So Freckle is one of the computer-based programs we use that's adaptive. So students take the STAR test and it's actually aligned with Freckle. Freckle then allows them to move at their own rate. So within whatever strand the teacher has decided for them to work on, maybe it is fractional knowledge, and that student is ready to be working on ratios and percents. And our adaptive practice will keep going in that strand. However, even if they're an advanced student and they get into that, they still need instruction. So that last part is the key. That group of enriching students, as you see at step 4, she's checking back in. She's looked through their problem sets to ensure they're there. They've done their individual Freckle adaptive practice work, and now she's checking in perhaps on the enrichment project they're doing. So our teachers, as part of their individual professional practice goals, tons of them have been working together to develop these really engaging projects that students are doing where they're engaging with the math. And again, you have 6, 7 of them. You might have at that point, Mrs. Callanan might say, okay, the 4 of you are all finished. You're going to go off and work on this project. And then they're having that experience of what engineers would have to do, which is get in a room and talk about math and struggle with these concepts together, and have conversations about the math. And again, that productive struggle that we always talk about being so critical for every range of learner. So that's sort of gives you an example of what a math workshop would look like at the upper elementary level.
Can I tie this back to concepts? Once again, I'm trying to follow the gifted thread in here.
Yep.
Right? So once again, one of the concepts in gifted IEPs is compacting, right? So in compacting, what happens is the child is allowed to do less work because they don't need as
many
absorb things
problems.
quickly and they don't need as much repetition, right? So let's say I have a child who, and I'm going to use 2% because like the really gifted thing is usually above 2%. And you have one of those childs in this classroom, right? And they learn super quick. How does something like compacting or something like that work in a classroom like this? Is it needed? Are you doing it automatically?
It is, yes, it's lesson by lesson, day by day, unit by unit. So there's pre-teaching, there's pre-assessments we can do. And what the 5th grade teachers, we were just talking about this in a PLC the other day, they were saying in some units, take multiplication and division. The next slide actually gets to this, that there's both procedural understanding and conceptual understanding. And many of our students at 4th grade and 5th grade will have procedural understanding. That's the old algorithm, the pencil paper, can they do the computation, right? The conceptual understanding. So frequently what will happen is exactly what you say, a compacting of a lesson. So could you go back to that, the back side. So in this one, that blue group, if that's a group that's going to be compacting because they're doing a multiplication of fractions. And in that group, that problem set, that number 2 in there, again, the video, they can speed through it. I already know this. I don't need to watch the whole lesson because it's videotaped instead of Mrs. Callanan standing in front of the group. They move through that. They go into their problem set, and Mrs. Callanan might say, yeah, I know that these students I've seen on the pre-assessment, go show me 2 of these problems to show that you can do the computation, that procedural knowledge. I want you to do these problems that are the conceptual understanding, showing me that you can explain the reasonableness, do your estimation, talk about the math, write about the math, show me models for your math, do that, and when I come back, if you finish that before I get to you, you're going to be going on to your adaptive practice, doing extension in that range wherever you are as an individual student. And then when I come back to you, we're going to be doing some group work because, again, even the 98th percentile, I would probably have a cohort of 4 or 5 within those 2 classes because of the way we flexibly group.
And one
Does that help?
further question. Yes.
Sure.
Yes. No, that actually does hit the compacting. You're talking about pre-assessments. Another thing that you see a lot in GIEPs is testing out, trying to test out. And a lot of schools do this very kind of insane thing where they ask the kid to get 100% on the pre-test in order to test out, which is completely unreasonable because at the end of the whole module, you know, you test, you get an 80, you've got a B, you show that you know the information, right? So there's always this like weird, like, if you're going to pre-test, we want you to pre-test at a much higher level than we would ever ask you to do an end test for the module.
Correct.
Right? So how does this pre-assessment that we keep talking about work? What you know, how does that stratify the children? How does that help?
So it has to be topic by topic. So that is why you will often see teachers doing warm-ups, and that is a formative tool, right? So they're looking to see how can they do on this quick check. So I was just in a 4th grade classroom today where the teacher was doing a math talk about fractions, and the students were putting up their whiteboards. And it was a 5-minute question. It was very open-ended, so there were students creating addition statements with fractions that were much more complex. They all had 3 fractions to work with, create an addition statement. And the kids were putting it up, and I watched the fourth grade teacher looking around, and there was a variety of levels of skill there. And so in that classroom, this looks a little bit differently. As soon as she finished that quick check, she's like, okay, that kid, that student already have this. They're going on to adaptive practice. I'll meet you with you at the end. Go do this independently. I'll see you soon. She's taking a small group of the kids who clearly don't have it and are pulling them over for some reteaching. So it has to be sort of, it can't be all encompassing at once, right? Because that's one overall score. And especially because we're looking at conceptual understanding in addition to procedural knowledge. Two essential components that when you get into the upper level math classes, you need to be able to have discourse. You need to be able to have productive struggle if you're sitting in a calculus classroom. Right, and you also need to be able to show the number sense. Those are all of those math practice standards that I was mentioning. Okay. Is that helpful? Yeah. So I think the whole idea of a pre-assessment, we do those frequently, but our STAR testing also gives those benchmark assessments along the way.
Yeah, all I'm trying to do is match up. You know, I had a gifted advocate for my kids. I did all the GIP stuff. So I'm just trying to kind of match up the concepts that I had to deal with a GIEP and the things that were done to help the gifted children with what you're doing in the classroom to see kind of what are the parallels, you know?
When I think some of the biggest piece of this becomes the conversation between the educator and the parent. So if you have a child who is coming home saying, I'm bored in math class, there needs to be a conversation that's going between the educator and the parent to figure out why is that boredom happening. Is it because they truly have mastered all of the concepts and they need to have more opportunities to work with like peers and struggle with more difficult concepts? Or are there other areas that the kid is using the word bored, but they actually need other types of engagement with the same material? That varies, but that's the importance of the conversation with the educator, in my opinion. Okay, so I already sort of talked about this, but I mentioned Freckle as one of our adaptive practices. Shelley and I have been exploring some other programs that we are looking to pilot this spring at 4th and 5th grade, because we really do have so many students that are at these really high levels of achievement. There is such a cluster of students in Hopkinton who are really between like the 93rd and 99th percentile. There's quite a lot of them. So we're looking to explore and pilot Art of Problem Solving, Beast Academy, which is another excellent tool for students who are really ready, like I said, to stretch the band and go into some really exciting work as mathematicians. This is just an example from 4th grade, so slightly different model, but you can see that there's a wide variety of ways to enrich and differentiate. And those are some things that we've had Mrs. Moran help put together for our teachers. And then I just wanted to give a similar example in ELA. In our readers workshop, our teachers do a lot with choice and voice. As I mentioned that earlier, it's not just about your reading level, but making sure we give you opportunities to find those areas that you really want to go into depth. And so this is an example of 5th grade of a choice board, which is something a lot of our teachers are exploring a lot more now, which gives students the opportunity to really go as far and as in depth as they want to on certain concepts. And so in this particular classroom, she's running guided reading groups, she is running book clubs, they're doing interactive read alouds, they're doing their writing work, and then in addition, there's the extension work choice boards that students go into in different areas. And this was one that I saw going on pretty recently. And just to give you an idea, the teacher has put together 4 print articles, online articles, videos, and to learn about with biographies and people who've made a difference in the world. And the students were working on writing biographies, thinking about character traits, challenges, achievements, and then coming up with different ways to present that information. Sometimes I've seen TED Talks being used, comic strips, stamps. So really, the creative gifted child can have an experience, while a child who's going to do a poetry presentation, there's just so many ways to go with this. And obviously, it gives access to all our students because, as I said, not everybody is evenly developed, right? So there might be a child who may not be able to access all of the print articles, but is going to really thrive, a dyslexic, with the videos and listening to the stories, and then go in to do some creative work, right? You talk about the double E, right? So like those students may not actually be able to read all of them. So this teacher has done an excellent job of making this same project accessible for a child who might be dyslexic and can't always read all of the texts that are there, but they still have pieces to access. So that just gives you a sense, a breadth of how many. And obviously some students are going to only have time to maybe delve into one or two of these individuals, and other students are going to go with this and run. I mentioned book clubs. So I think a lot of people think about Fontes and Pinnell or our reading program, kids are in leveled groups. Well, they are sometimes, and that's an important part of our program. But we also use book clubs, and these really excite me. Fontes and Pinnell has beautiful text sets on various themes. We have Jacqueline Woodson here. These are 2 5th grade text sets, empathy themes. They are diverse texts. They are engaging. The kids love them. And because these are real novels, we can get them as read-alouds for our students that may not be able to access them. But again, what you can see here is these book clubs are going on, heterogeneous perhaps, frequently. Many of our students who are really gifted readers and just engorge books, they're going to go and say, I want to do more. I'm really into this theme. There might have been an interactive read aloud about empathy. They're really into it. And then as you can see, Fontes and Pinnell puts together examples of different kinds of exploratory projects to take it further. So again, a student who finishes their multi-paragraph essay and have done their literary analysis on their book might be going off to work on a project with a peer that extends it even further.
And I think one of the things that I like about the way these are built by theme and by author, Jacqueline Woodson, that gets us into all of our places of diversity, equity, inclusion have been part of our school improvement plans for years now. If we're thinking about them by theme and you're looking at things like empathy or hope, we are actually building in other aspects of our school improvement plans just by the literature that we're presenting to some of our kids. So it's good.
So I hope that gives you a snapshot of the kinds of ways that at Hopkins we do differentiation.
Can I ask about a different, I'm oddly comforted about the academics. I think you've got, and for me personally, I think, not every child maybe feels completely challenged all the time, but I think there's an important learning in that too. But I guess could you speak a little bit about, particularly in the elementary grades, students who are thinking at a very rapid pace, often don't have the same self-awareness or listening skills, or there's a whole set of interpersonal skills that can, be hard to master because their thoughts are so far in a direction that, they just forget that not everybody's with them, or that this isn't the time or place, or like all of those other dimensions of being part of a community. So can you talk about how our teachers are equipped to handle that in the classroom?
Sure. But do you want me to talk? Or do you want to
well-
talk a little bit? Because I know you're in the other schools too. And
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and that is the work that we're really looking at. So, as you know, you met Carla Burley last week, and so some of the work that she's doing is really thinking about ways we can embed social and emotional learning into our buildings and to capitalize on not only how do we do that as a standalone, because sometimes it does have to stand alone, but the better way of looking at it from our perspective is really embedding those strategies into the academics. So things are happening smoothly, not like we've got this lesson in SEL and this lesson in English. The more that we can enmesh those concepts, the better. But we also have specialized programs that we're using. So, like I'm thinking about Michelle Garcia Winner's social thinking, where I hear Lauren DeBoe talking about Blurt Out Bob, or I won't say it right, but all these amazing superhero characters that kids, we encourage teachers through school-wide language to think about. Is Blurting Bob in your brain right now? Is Rock Brain, kind of invading your space right now? How are we going to move you past some of these roadblocks? Zones of Regulation is another program that we use in our schools. The whole PBIS initiative that we've got going in terms of really supporting students, and that's through all 3 buildings as well. What are the expectations? How do you know as a learner what we expect of you? And it's not just that it's what we expect of you in 1 out of 15 first grade classrooms, but it's what do we expect out of you school-wide. So any faculty member should be able to come and support you in your learning.
And that's where so up there, it was empathy. That was one of those themes. So the 5th grade Fontes and Pinnell, various themes. There's I think 6 or 7 sets that are social emotional themes. And so the work that we're doing with our PBIS team right now, which is really exciting, and our curriculum team leaders in ELA is actually meshing these together. So we have our principals cabinet, right? February is kindness and empathy, and we're working to embed lessons on kindness and empathy within our morning meeting structures, but then also looking to use that as our themes within our literature book clubs during that month. So that's where we see this going, and that's exactly what Jen is talking about, is actually meshing the work of PBIS in with what we're doing curriculum-wise. And that's when you can start having really exciting conversations, because then when there's a conflict in the classroom, somebody's not showing empathy, you can come back to the books that you're talking about. And at the upper elementary grades, that's really important. The interactive read-alouds where they're gaining empathy and having conversations about it. And so all of the Fontes and Pinnell various grade levels for their book clubs and their interactive read-alouds embed tons of work with social emotional themes that are appropriate for each grade level. Does that help?
Looking at me. No, that was Amanda's question,
Oh,
but
right.
I because I've been
can
asking
share.
all of them. I think this sounds great. My next question would be then what happens when you transition to middle school and everything starts to become more rigid? So prior to that, the kids have a lot of movement, it sounds like. They have a lot of ability to kind of go up, and go faster and move forward and maybe learn a lot more math than they normally would have during that year. So what happens when you transition to middle and then high school where it's more rigid, right? Like if I, let's say, started an honors program at a certain level, it's really hard to then go up to the AP program, right? Like how does that transition occur? How do you ensure that kids are still being supported to grow the same way that you're supporting them at these levels? And, how do you, once again, prevent the child from kind of becoming stagnant and stuck in a particular level?
So I do think that in terms of leveling, I don't want people to think that it's sort of that, once you got into a class, you stayed in that class for an entire year. Sometimes we'll say to kids, give this level a try and see where you are in 5 weeks. And if this isn't the right place for you, you may want to go to the AP course, or you may want to go to the college prep course. So I don't think we don't keep kids in sort of fixed spaces like there was at one time. As you know, when kids get to middle school, we start to level the math, and then at the high school level, things are very leveled up there. But I don't think that we keep them in places where they're fixed. There's an awful lot of sort of flexibility and movements up and down. And if you do have students who are, and I know that you're looking at the going up, but I think if there are kids who are in a place where they're struggling, we always give them opportunities to kind of meet with counselors to get some kind of academic support before we say to them, this isn't the right fit for you. So I think we're really careful to make sure that kids are in the right place, and we give them every opportunity to sort of stay in that place or move from that place if they need to.
I think part of the reason I'm asking is because, once again, that compacting thing, right? So it's not just about level with a gifted student, it's about speed. It's about how much they're able to move through, right? And so all of this at the elementary school level sounds like it's geared in a way that it would allow a child who fits this category to do that, right? To move faster, to dig in to find ways to get that creative interest in whatever topic, really dig in, it sounds like it's all there. But if a child is, I don't know, advanced math, AP class, in AP's hard because it's towards an exam, but like it's something high level, right? And they're with a bunch of other children, usually in a high school, and I'm not talking about our high school necessarily, I'm just talking about general high school, right? They're going at a certain speed. There's no more compacting for that child. There's no more, I can speed up as part of this class, and the rest of the class may go a little slower, and I'm moving forward a lot. So how does, I guess I'm worried about the shock. It's a weird word to use, but the kind of weird transition that a child might have from, I have all this flexibility, I get to go, I get to move quickly, I get to like really dig in, I get to go at the speed I want, and then they get into this, once again, more rigid structure.
I think, so as I said, I'm highlighting 2 grades here, but I think it's important to remember that all of our teachers are working on differentiation. And so you go into a 6th grade classroom, they all may be reading similar books. I do believe that they do some choice in books up there as well, right? So, I mean, students are working with different texts and independent reading, and they're working with writing in different ways, and same things. That's part of the work of the teacher. And so just because I'm highlighting an elementary way of approaching that, I don't think that we can say middle school teachers don't differentiate. That's one of the jobs of an educator, right? And so again, I go back to what's the conversation, and where compacting takes place most frequently is within a math cycle, right? So I mean, that's why you see that transition start at an earlier grade.
Yeah, and like I said, I was asking how
Yeah.
our schools might be.
I think the AP slide shows that the students are ending up where they need to end up too, and I mean.
Yeah, I think the other really great thing that's happening at our middle school is, and I think we have the quote middle school, and then we have the Hopkinton Middle School. And when I think about ours in particular, what I see is a lot of communication between the high school and the middle school. So when we have situations where we have a student who's really excelling, and generally in those cases we've had a conversation with parents, we've had multiple conversations with teachers. There's a lot of connectivity between the curriculum leader at the middle school and the curriculum leaders at the high school. So we, I could tell you about cases where we've really individually designed programs for students because the typical kind of trajectory isn't working for them. And I've also seen some pretty incredible shifting over the past several years in the way that our middle school educators are really thinking about differentiating and broadening the types of opportunities for students, whether it be inquiry-based projects or book clubs like Vanessa referred to. And I think we've had some very consistent curricular oversight with the director of VLA and a math coach at the elementary level. And those are some of the places that we're now starting to look in terms of our middle school programming. What is working really well, and who are our experts there with things that are really stellar, and where can we look at places where we have some growth to make. But overall, I would say that there is a lot of choice, and just in some of the conversations that we've been having this year as a district, we're also talking a lot about relationship building. I just had a conversation with a 6th grade teacher today, and one of the most important things that I think we're really capitalizing on through our DEI work and some of our curriculum differentiation is teachers knowing their students. How do you know them as people? How do you know them as learners? How do you know them as numbers on that piece of paper? And all of those, and how do you know their families? And so all of those things are they're all part of that really important equation to make sure that we are doing just right work for our students. I'm not saying we get it right every time, because it's always a learning process, but I think those are the goals.
Once again, what I'm just exploring, and thank you.
Yeah, of
but
course.
yeah, what I'm just exploring is, since we're talking gifted, I'm just trying to do general concerns that parents of gifted kids might have, and asking questions based on that, and seeing how, Hopkinton handles those situations, how, you know, what are we still working on, like you
Right.
said,
Right.
you know, where are we strong, what are the things that parents should know about our
Right.
school district.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, so I've been thinking about your question. And I think when we're talking about something like math, certainly there's the compacting because we can say, oh, look, you know, this is something that I think Leah already knows how to do, right? But I think when we introduce a new concept, very frequently we have kids who are instant mastery people, right? They've got it and they can demonstrate that to you immediately. But there's a host of research that says that for a lot of kids, that's still just living in the working memory, right? So I've got it, and every single day that I'm going to show it to you. But if you go out 6 months or if you go out a year, oftentimes without the appropriate number of exposures, it's not going to go to the stored memory, right? So I think that that's one of those balances that a teacher is faced with. How do I make sure that the instant mastery kid is actually going to be able to move this to stored memory? Or maybe it's already there, which we discovered through compacting, because if I was doing her fraction example, right, and this was the first day we were doing it and kids could demonstrate knowledge, they hadn't done it in a very long time, that kid's got it. So that's another one of those things that I think teachers have to be really careful about, because we do want mastery, we do want it stored as well, so.
So one thing that has jumped out at me, and I will say my experience district-wide with our teachers is that they are excellent at differentiation. I have had learners on both ends of the spectrum of struggling versus kids who are a little more advanced in some cases. It seems like the elementary model, and at Hopkins in particular, the way that the classrooms are grouped together and they have switch teachers, that the flexible grouping would be easier to accomplish in that case than it would be at the middle school. And I know we do have different levels of math at the middle school, and then at the high school there's, I think, different levels for almost every course we offer. I don't have a specific thought on how that would impact learners at any level, but it seems like inherently it would be more challenging to get those cohorts in a middle school classroom, just because you're looking at 50 kids that are together in elementary grouping versus 25 in a middle school classroom. I don't know.
Yeah, I was a really annoying child, by the way, who would sit in my AP calculus class and read. And the teacher would tap my shoulder, and I'd look up, and I'd see what was there, and then I'd go back to reading. And I'd get my A's and B's without, you know, because that was me in math. And so not only did I have children, I also experienced being that child. So I try really hard to, to think through, like, you know, what are the things that are hard when you get to that kind of level.
And that's a middle school, I know, almost anywhere you go, that the team teaching is more the approach in the middle school model, so I don't know.
Yeah, I'd love to hear how the
that-
differentiation is happening. That's wonderful, that we're starting to exercise that. But
And I would think particularly coming out of the pandemic that the differentiation has had to be just even a little bit more than what it would have been, and just to commend our educators for rising again to one of a billion extra tasks they've had.
So do you want to wrap up with some extracurricular talk, Jen?
Oh, sure. So Carol had put together just a small snapshot. Those are the letters Q through S of our high school extracurriculars. Jessie could speak to that certainly more than I could, but you know, the idea is, the gist is there are so many things outside of the classroom and available for our students. And if you
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many things you can do any day of the week. You can stay after school, and there are at least like 5 or 6 clubs meeting at any floor. And there's also something that I think is really great, especially at the high school and at the middle school too, is whatever you want to create, like you can do that too. So if there's by any chance something that's not already on the list, you can absolutely take initiative and create it yourself, which is also awesome.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of things you hear from parents, we've heard from parents who have talked to us, is that they're looking, especially in the sort of the elementary grades, maybe through middle school, they're looking for opportunities for their kids to find kids to think with, you know, about whatever it is, like whether it's robotics, or maybe they love geography, or maybe they, whatever it is that some of these kids have very passionate interests. And so I think at the high school, as you said, we have an amazing array of places to find your home. And I think we have some of that in the middle school, not to this degree. In the high school, it's exceptional. I think the HPTO offers a lot of extracurricular programming especially in Hopkins grade. I don't know how extensive it is at Elmwood.
There's pretty extensive HPTO extracurriculars. I don't know how many of them are, like what the different topics are versus the breadth that the high school has, because it's kids who are able to oftentimes get themselves to and from activities differently than elementary kids.
But I think I think for a lot of families, they find those sort of thinking buddies, or those in extracurriculars, in Destination Imagination, or in some of those other programs that we have for our kids at the younger grades. And it is important, I think, to take in a sort of recreational way, find a way to also use those talents that some of these kids have that are sort of bubbling out of them in the school day, and then have a place to go and exhale and be themselves and get creative in a discipline. Just like, I was a soccer player. I like to hang out with soccer players because that was fun. It was a passion of mine. So I think it's the same way that, athletes have sports, and some athletes also have other areas of interest. But I think the extracurriculars are critical for these kids that you're talking about, but for all kids.
Yeah, like I think when I look at that list, I think science fair is just so very different from ultimate frisbee. But there are groups of kids who are going to gravitate to both of those places and find what they need.
Yeah. It's harder in the elementary school. I think it's harder when they're younger. But I think the more we can do, and the HPTO is great at that.
Well, you talk about the younger grades. I think this is a perfect example of how that sort of comes about at our level. So we have a lot of students at Hopkins who have been really passionate. I've done the Hawk Squad in the past with community service. And this year, some students came to me who have been enriched in their reading groups. Some of the higher level text was really getting into environmental issues. And these students wrote to me, they came to see me, they had stacks of every book in the library. And they are putting together a green team. And so I have been roped in with these students. So again, it's all about nurturing them, right? So they hold me to it. They're at my door on Monday mornings at their lunchtime. And they have been putting together the applications. They were putting together the announcements to talk about this new club that's happening at lunchtime. And we are we need parent volunteers now that we can have them back in the school. I'm really excited because these students are going to be doing trash cleanup. They have big ideas about our garden, and you can see awareness and fundraising. So they just pushed out this form to fourth graders. They're going to be going through the applicants and putting together their groups at lunchtime to do this various work. So I think you're absolutely right. Like finding ways, and this is exactly what you're talking about. They had this passion. Their teachers were nurturing it through what they were reading. They went into the library. Miss Pardee is giving them every book, and they bring them in and say, we need to have birdhouses. We need to save the salamanders that are in the swamps behind Hopkins. I mean, the ideas are tremendous, and it's just so exciting to be part of that process. And it's the teachers nurturing them, it's the parents, and it's the kids' innate desire to make a difference in their world, which is definitely there. So I think that's a good example of how we try to do that in the schools, and the teachers really do work with those individual passions. That is one of the great pieces about bringing in guided inquiry and project-based learning. Mr. Carter, our new assistant principal at Hopkins, came from Holliston in the social studies middle school, so he's bringing a lot of that project-based learning to our social studies team and working with them right now on that. So there's a lot of ways that we are working to bring that in, even when we don't have quite as many clubs.
Yes.
So I would, as you were talking, what I started to think about too is I know that you have had different my son did the Rubik's Cube Club when he was at Hopkins, yes, and things that have come from interest that way. But I would guess that some of this was stagnated by COVID, and that the ability to kind of get
little
kids, yeah, more than a
little
little bit.
Though I was just talking at the band concert that, you know, we still kept
Yeah.
percussion going, and we bought steel drums, and they did an amazing steel drum performance last year. So I mean, there's another example of a way for kids to explore passions. You know, we had our show tonight, which had hot cross buns, but we will have students in the talent show who will be playing Star Wars music. So again, there's gifted in so many different ways, and that's what we want to nurture, all of those different types of giftedness.
So I know we're really late. I
It's
just
okay,
have
go ahead.
one last question. So, 2E kids. One of the big things that happens with 2E kids is they mask their, I don't want to say weaknesses. They mask their special education needs because they're bright enough to kind of work through them until they get to a certain grade, and then usually what happens is the cognitive load from that grade is just so much that the kid can't mask anymore. So how do you deal with that, right? Because a kid who's masking is probably not working at the level they could because they're working so hard to overcome difficulties, right? So it might be dyslexia, right? It might be ADD. It might be, several things. So how do you work with that kind of thing?
Well, I think that's why it's so important to really look at the whole child. And Amanda, you spoke about the social emotional needs. So one of the caveats I always have about how quickly we push a child forward is that the social experiences of school are just as important. And so plopping a student who is 11 years old into a group of 15-year-olds developmentally, the conversations that are happening and how that works, that can be really tricky. And so I think that is why we have to really think carefully about what each learner needs. And so when you were talking about it's just as important to develop the social emotional, I think back to my own first grader who said I should skip first grade and go into second grade. I said, nope, you got to work on making friends this year. You already know how to spell, you know the math, but you're working on making friends. That's our job as adults, to tell them what their goals for that year are. And the job of the educators and the parents working together with the children to establish their individual goals. So I think that's really important, is that, as I said earlier, it's not always even. Just because a child has one area of strength, they might need to be working on how they communicate with their classmates about math or about reading. That part might be really tricky for them.
So that is an interesting point, and it is a very common argument with the gifted thing. But there's the counter argument that a gifted child, maybe not with a 15-year-old, but maybe the 11-year-old moving to a classroom with 12 or 13-year-olds might actually fit better there emotionally because they're sort of talking at the kid's level. So even though the child's 11, a lot of the concerns they have, a lot of the thoughts they have, a lot of the way they interact kind of fits more with their 12, 13. And in fact, when placed in situations where they can socialize with those groups, they have a tendency to make friends within those groups as opposed to with their own kind of age peers. So is that something that happens within our schools?
Well, I think the one thing that stands out to me is when you talked about the I, so whether it's a GIP or a special education IEP, I think it's the individual component of that. So I would not be able to tell you that, yes, globally we have a plan for those situations because I think they're so highly unique and individualized. But when those situations happen, it's incumbent upon us to meet with a child's team, whether they have a special education team or just the team of educators to work with them and work with their family and really start to tease out some of the topics and the questions that Vanessa was referring to and some of the things that you're referring to. What makes this child tick? Where are the barriers? Where are the successes? And what do we need to be doing to help that child be successful? So I think in those cases we handle them individually.
Okay, thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Wow, that was,
Thank
that was definitely not a
Thank you.
30-minute report. I didn't time it, but thank you very much for bringing all of this
Yeah.
in. It will probably take me a little bit of time to absorb all of what it is, and we may have more questions from members of the community that could certainly reach out to the entire school committee as well as Dr. Kavanaugh.
Yeah, I really appreciate you answering my questions. I know I asked a lot of targeted questions. I was trying to tease out, like I said, all this information that parents who have gifted children, who understand gifted programs and stuff may be asking. So I just wanted to make sure that we got those answers out in public so they could dig in more if there were areas that they wanted to.
Will this be up on the website in your presentation?
Oh, sure, George,
That
I
would be
can do
great.
that, yeah.
That would be great, thank you. And thank you for coming after the Hopkins concert. It has to have been a very, very long day for you.
A big day.
Listen, I got all my saxophone in.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
So the next thing that we had on the agenda here is to discuss the liaison roles and meetings that potentially would need attention and coverage over the next, between now and the school committee. The election obviously is on May 16th. The reorganization meeting for the school committee would be the next meeting, which would be May 19th. So we're looking at coverage between now and May 19th, basically, with a little bit of time carved out where there are very few subcommittee meetings because of town meeting the first week of May. So I went through and I identified the ones that had been covered by both Joe and Meg, and to look to make sure that what upcoming meetings are coming for those. We could attack this one of two ways. One is we could revote any roles that are left open, or we could collectively hold the responsibility and make sure that there are people to physically be at the meetings and communicate with on individual. Given the period of time that this is actually covering, I think that might be an easier approach, would be to kind of look at making sure meetings are covered and that we have point people for them. But I'm open to other suggestions. And I can give you, actually, I did not send this out, I apologize.
I was gonna say,
Nope,
where did you
I
highlight?
pulled them out.
I
Nope,
know,
I didn't,
was
I'm
looking
sorry, I
at
did
it.
not do anything. So, the first one is the Irvine Tadaro group, and that does not appear to have any meetings upcoming. They're not posted on the town calendar, but I can reach out to the chair certainly for that. The next one is the Marathon Fund, which actually came up at our last meeting about the scholarships, and I think they're very active right now. Their next meeting is on the 28th, so that is March 28th. I don't know, and that's a Monday. I don't know how that looks for people.
I can do
There's-
any evening. So I'm a good evening or early in the morning.
The bullying prevention and intervention is the next one, and I know that we have not voted the final plan on
We have
that.
not.
What are the are there upcoming meetings that would need coverage in the immediate next couple of weeks?
No, I don't think so. I think that the plan is in actually very good shape.
Okay.
Yeah. That group doesn't even really meet anymore.
Okay, and I just want to pull up, I did not pull the time up on the Marathon Fund Committee. I'm just going to pull that up quickly from the town website. The planning board, and Amanda, I have you listed as an alternate for
Yes,
that.
I can do
That is this coming Monday, the 21st. And then there's another one on Monday, the 4th of April. Are you able to do?
Yeah, I can do that.
Excellent.
Are we doing office hours? No, we're doing office hours.
We are doing office hours this Sunday.
Yeah,
And then Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Which does not conflict with any of the things I have listed here.
Yeah, I can't do April 4th because that's the Freedom Team meeting.
Okay, so Amanda, if you're able to cover those,
Yep, I
that
got
would be great. CPAC, the next meeting is Tuesday, April 26th. I would actually like to cover that if that's okay with you guys. I had a very productive meeting with Jen Halliday, who's the president of CPAC, and she is
fantastic.
phenomenal. And she is actually going to come probably in April to talk with us in person. The Hopkinton Organized for Prevention, I have you listed as an Amanda as an alternate on that, and I know their next meeting is Wednesday, April 6th at 6 p.m. They have shifted.
So they shifted.
yeah.
Oh, I can go back then.
And then the Sustainable Green, which I was not able to find a specific date, so I can reach out and we can kind of do the scheduling offline.
What about, I think Joe was our liaison to the planning board.
Yes, so
That's the
Amanda's the
interesting
alternate. Yep,
Oh,
yep, yep. The
I missed
other,
that one.
there are a couple of other things that are a little more complicated because roles that typically have two members, now, if there are two members, it violates the quorum. So the first example I pulled of that was the policy working group, because there were two of you and now there's one.
Yeah.
Do you feel, and I would look actually to you as well, Carol, that that is something that with the policies that we already have in the queue, because we're between now and May.
Do we have anything that's coming up that we absolutely have to review in the next couple
I
of
don't think so. I think we're also in pretty good shape.
So we're gonna clean up the equity one,
Yep.
Yeah.
and that should be,
Yeah, then we could just
No,
put
you can work
policy
it.
on hold.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Well, we could work at it for the ones that, if there are any others that are in the queue already, we could work at them
right,
right
or
here.
if
so-
something
sure.
comes up
Yeah.
that's, you know, high priority that we really need to look at, yeah.
Good idea.
The ESBC two, I know that we
Yes.
voted a couple meetings ago for you to be the primary member of that. That there is typically an alternate member.
I think I'm okay
You're
being
okay
the
with-
primary. It's a once a month meeting right now.
April.
Yeah, at some point it may become more, but for now it's once a month. I can cover it, no problem.
Okay. So those, and then the other piece is planning the agenda, because that also is something that Amanda and I had been doing together, and I think that maybe we may want to.
I think you're it.
But I do really value the input in that we have worked together. I don't.
I know, we have to post it though.
Yeah.
Well, so here's a question, and I guess it's an OML question. Could we speak with Dr. Kavanaugh and have her like put together thoughts and then
So I
have her help us?
I definitely think that two people or three people can send thoughts to Dr. Kavanaugh regarding the agenda, and you can work with Georgette to kind of bring those onto the initial agenda, and then we can meet with Georgette before it goes out. Sure. If that, does that,
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. Like that shouldn't be an OML thing, right?
Yeah.
Like that's because we're all sending her,
Right.
we're not
Just don't send them
discussing
all to
our.
me.
Yeah, exactly.
okay?
So, I'm sorry. So we're all gonna send you any thoughts on agenda items, and Georgette will send us a draft.
We'll send
So,
Nancy.
I think the draft, I don't think we can discuss the draft as the issue.
Right.
I think the draft has to come to me, but if you guys put your thoughts to Carol first. And then we can also try to use the time here that we have for future agenda items, because we can discuss it there before the meeting, so that.
I'm just trying to think. I feel like there's some topics that come up at the end of the year. I'm trying to think. Yeah. I'm fine if you plan it too. I mean, it's
Yeah,
only a
I'm
couple,
okay.
a handful of meetings.
Like-
It
Yeah.
is. There are no more planned meetings for March. It's 2 meetings in April. And then,
Election.
yep, but that agenda would be planned before the election.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then we're good with liaison roles for now. We can come back if we need to. That brings us into items by consensus.
As superintendent, I recommend the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
I'll second that.
A motion by Leah and a second by Amanda. All those in favor? Aye. And it is unanimous. That brings us, I actually inadvertently skipped over future agenda items. I was thinking they were the other way around. We do still have, we had talked about having a special education specific to dyslexia and a couple of other things come before, and also Jen Halliday coming. Are there?
And then policy JBB will probably be back because we'll hopefully have discussed it by then. And then we did have the special education policy. That was the other policy that we were still looking at. I don't know how people feel about waiting for a full policy group for that, or if it was almost to the right place. Like,
I feel like we didn't make a lot of suggestions because of where that fell in the meeting. I feel like it might benefit from a a full policy working group. Unless you feel like,
Yeah, okay.
unless you feel ready to make.
Yes, that I get. I'm kind of uncomfortable with,
I also,
with making suggestions on really, really like important policies and being like, it's just me and Dr. Kavanaugh. Like, I feel like.
Well, it's not, because it comes to us.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's true
That's
too.
true.
So if you guys feel like you're able to bring it to a place where it's ready to come back, the other option is that it really won't be too long before we have a full committee.
Yeah, that's true too.
So that it could pause a little bit, give time for CPAC to really highlight on and give
That would,
feedback.
yeah,
was
that
gonna
would
say,
be really great.
That's-
Yeah, did that go to Dr. Zaleski as well?
Sorry.
I think she had seen it early on, but I think I may have her take a look at it again
That
with
would be
her
great.
team chairs.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
All right, then I think we're ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Leah, second by Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned at 9:29. Thank you very much for everybody for hanging in,
Yes,
and thank you
thank
for
you.
everybody who was able to come in person.